if you would please, for the people that have a chance to listen to this podcast here at the Leak Project and through Facebook and different forums as well, tell us about yourself. I mean, what brought you to where you are? I read through some of the trials and tribulations that you've gone through, and wow, I mean, it's like something you can make an entire series out of
I
just
sure
the stuff that
could.
you've seen. So,
Yeah, I sure could make a series about it. I've written several books actually about it. The books were stolen on October 13th of 2015, trying to tell my story. I've literally been trying to tell my story since I've been a little child. I was brought up enhanced with medicine and injections and all kinds of torture and trauma and put into these programs as a child. Been surrounded with ritual abuse and testing and torture and more testing to be inserted into these black operative programs. Anything ranging from psychic analyzing to remote viewing to spy work and time travel. The most notorious program I'd been involved was with the Montauk side of things, but on something called the Plum Island Girls. I don't know any other survivors other than myself with the Plum Island aspect to Montauk. But my kind of
let
thing.
me jump in real quick if I can, just because it's kind of pertinent to what you just brought up. I have a good friend, actually, one of the few people I still know from back when I was just a kid. He actually used to live just down the street from me, and he was involved with the Montauk program. And I don't know exactly what part, but he's got like scars on his body and stuff, and he's still under this weird. He has just a very interesting life. Let me just put it to you that way. Like where he lives, I think, is still under some type of, how do I put this? I think he still has handlers, and he's 39. It's very interesting. So please get into that. That's incredible.
Right. My career actually started with my father's corporation he was working for called Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. And at the time, as a little child, a lot of the Project Paperclip scientists were over there. I know they not so recently closed Sandoz, but many of those scientists ended up going over into Brookhaven Labs, which is a big conspiracy in itself. So I was kind of worked on with a very famous mind control expert named Dr. Lewis. I always knew him as Dr. Lewis, and it turned out to be Dr. Lewis Joylin, one of the cohorts of General Aquino, one of his famous cohorts. And these people brutalized us children. They put us through torture and trauma, lots of sexual abuse, satanic type um, torture, disgraceful type of things, and then tested us. And it's a little hard to talk about. I recently did a series with the History Channel that'll be airing in April about the Plum Island aspect of it. It makes me really upset. Um, yeah, there's a lot of torture, Rex, and uh, I my career took me all the way to the Gulf War with the military and government. I was a remote viewer into the Gulf War. The things that I saw throughout my life were terrifying. You'd be physically witnessing demons in front of you or terrestrial beings. And I know it sounds very sci fi, but the extraordinary technology that was also present during my torture and testing are equipment that I've never seen to this day in any public forum or technology I've ever seen, even scanning the internet. So this is technology that's not known to mankind, but a certain group certainly know this technology, and it's either very futuristic or very ancient, such high levels of technology that was attached to us physically, this machinery to kind of force you into certain mind control programs. And I think because of the way they made me from, I was enhanced in my mother's womb with lots of medication she took, and then coming out of the womb,
What kind of
just
medication?
it was injections. So what wherever in those vials of injections, it was more than vaccines. I was physically injected almost on a daily basis for years, given what was told to me at the time, allergy shots and things like that. And the type of shots were things that would make you go into these conscious levels of or subconscious levels of awareness that, as a child, you're not understanding such, but it caused me to hear people's minds, thoughts. I could not only hear their thoughts, but I could feel their feelings. A lot of times it didn't match what was coming out of their mouths. If they were speaking something, their minds would, completely oppose what was coming out of their mouths. But I always heard this fourth little voice in the person, and it was what I used to call the God voice, because it would always try to, tell me about that person's beauty and to try to tell the person to stop thinking and feeling that way, to stop being so illicit or lying or abusive or, whatever. So, I tried to be this little supernatural child seeing dead people and ghosts and demons. It was just a normal thing for me. I to this day still see energy. I see grids and specks, whether they're black or sparkly. So I'm this extraordinary child with seeing dead people and demons and creatures like Anubis, even Anubis and Baal and Bastet, and I can name some of these beings now, but as a child I did not know who this Anubis character was standing in my bedroom with me and my baby sister. And my parents, my mother predominantly was my handler, and she was highly abusive, emotionally abusive and verbally abusive. And I believe it took me 49 years to kind of admit that she knew what she was doing. Um, it was a type of life where I was put into so much trauma and sexual abuse and all of this training, this testing on a military level, tested and trained in psychic abilities and remote viewing and CRV and kinesis. I was trained through the military and science and government programs. So I was sort of built so enhanced that hearing the soul's voice in people made me drive to learn more about what that voice was. So I started investigating the soul at age 8 and began reading my first book, Plato's Dialogues on the Soul. And I haven't stopped since. So
what bases did you go to, and could you describe to us the actual experiments that they would do for telekinesis and different psychic level testing, please?
Whew. All right. It's hard to talk about because there's so much trauma and torture in the process before they sit you in the chair and test you. You need to give me the question again so I know how to answer that properly.
Okay. Now, you said that you remember different military bases. So I was wondering what military bases they trained you at, and if you could tell us about like the actual testing that they did to see, okay, we're going to open this person's third eye to where she can see this demon or something, because you said you see demons and archetypes and specific what many people would consider Egyptian gods, because that's what a lot of people, that's their thought when they think of Anubis, kind of like the god of the underworld, right?
Correct. All right, so let's go all the way back to the childhood, because it began at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. I was physically tested and tortured in that location of Sandoz Pharmaceuticals.
And your dad was the one that was actually doing this to you?
I believe my mother was my handler. My father traveled often between his accounts he had through the industry that he was providing. Sandoz Pharmaceuticals was one of the industries he was providing his service to. So predominantly the torture and testing took place there for years, into my high school years. So I was 16 when I graduated early, all the way through Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. In the interim of Sandoz building me, I was taken into the East Hampton area, the Hamptons of New York. I had an auntie living up there. She still lives there. And then my programming began there at that base, not on Camp Hero. This was on Plum Island, Rex. This was the Animal Disease Control Center. There are underground bases under that facility, which is now closed, by the way. It moved into Kansas in Tornado Alley. So they were experimenting on animals and mutations and genetics and time travel, diseases, biowarfare. And my memories are between Sandoz and Montauk Point in the Hamptons. I've got some missing years of school between 6th grade and almost 10th grade. So the facility I'm certain I was at that point was Plum Island. When they sit you down and test you, it could be a number of things. So if you're being trained to be a psychic, you're tested with lots of cards, you're tested with games, you're tested with brain stimuli. They've got all these wires connected to your head to see, what facilitates the, I don't even know how to explain that. I don't know how to explain that. You'd always have a handler with you, and it would be a handler that would be with you for years, and they would change depending on the program. The remote viewing was taught in basically like classrooms, as were a lot of these programs, the kinesis programs. it takes a lot out of you physically. It truly does. I mean, some of the things with moving items would exhaust me for, I'm not kidding you, weeks, like weeks out of my body. It would just, I'd be sick. I'd be so sick for weeks after, it might take me 4 hours to finally move something. And then I'd be, headaches and sick for weeks. When I could finally start to levitate things, I'd be sick for a good month. So it's a lot of abuse on the body. It's a lot of abuse on the mind because
Bet you those drugs they were injecting you with had a part of it as well.
the drugs were definitely a part of it, as well as Sandoz would create these things for the populace, though. They created fizzies and all kinds of little candies for the kids that were out in the public. And they'd kind of, like, my father would bring these things home and say, here, try these. And they'd, he'd drop a little tablet in my glass of water and it would turn into this fizzy stuff. And my sisters and brother wouldn't take it, but I would. So I'd be like this guinea pig for some of their products. And to see them out on the market was even, more extraordinary because, honestly, I feel like some of this stuff was obviously poisoning people to give you some of the inserted. I know nanotech maybe wasn't a big thing back in the 70s, but I'm certain it was already out there. I'm certain of it
Oh,
with
I
the
remember.
technology to control the brain.
Absolutely. I remember reading an article back in 2011 about nanotech, and there's thousands of consumer products now that actually use nanotechnologies to basically transition certain chemicals to bypass the brain blood barrier, go right to the brain. And
Yeah.
it's so tiny, it's pretty scary to think about the long-term consequences and how easy it would be to put certain products in people via nanotech. So that's interesting that you brought up the testing, and then you look at the aspartame phenomenon, which is in virtually all products. Now, if you go to the grocery store or a gas station, especially if you want to pick up a drink, if you want to pick up a fruit drink even, or some gum or mints or candy, almost all of it has aspartame, which is genetically modified E. coli feces, which in the 70s, there was a briefing with Congress and the Pentagon where they said, yeah, aspartame could be used as a weapon to take out entire civilizations, essentially. And now it's in everything and it's okay. So that's fascinating. Sorry to divert attention there. Let's go back to where you were discussing. So they used you as a guinea pig, and did they use your other family members, like your sisters and brothers as well?
Absolutely not. I was the ostracized child. I was the reject. I was the freak. I was the spawn of Satan because I could see and hear and feel things and say things what was on people's mind. I knew foreign languages when I was a little child. I would speak them fluently. It was just I was a phenomenon to my parents. I was the Satan's child. That's what my name was. I was an abused child. I was neglected and abused and never hugged, never loved, never told anything good. I was pretty much hated throughout my entire first 30 years of my life. You mentioned something about the blood barrier. I mean, that is the predominant thing that they will assault you with right in the womb with ultrasound. These ultrasounds aren't even necessary on a pregnant woman. Ultrasound was developed by the Navy, for goodness sakes. I mean, the Navy would not even use this. They use this as a weapon, Rex, and yet they're ultrasounding little children to get at the blood barrier to insert to mess the genetics up, basically. Let's
I had never
simplify.
heard that before. That's
Oh
brand
my
new to me.
goodness. Yes, this is a phenomenon. Actually, this is what should be known. In fact, most deaths with childbirth happen in a hospital. You'd be safer to have the child at home. Disregard these ultrasounds. There's a woman named Janice Bartholomew that speaks on it. She's a former nurse and became a midwife to, talk about what was happening in the hospitals. And that's just Satanism in itself in every hospital, USA. I'm not quite sure worldwide if they do the ultrasound kind of thing, but yes, developed by the Navy for the blood barrier. Now, you have to remember Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. I'm not sure if you know or your listening audience knows, but they are the procure of generic prescriptions. So not only did they make products of sweet candies and, things for the population, they also created generic medicines. So I believe the nanotechnology was inserted in that. And, we've got an infected, mind-controlled blockhead sort of society. And I do believe it has a lot to do with the nanotechnology and the artificial telepathy and the inserted implants in the brain and body. And, we have a lot of lies to yet uncover. But what made me come out of it was this thing called the soul. I never stopped seeking what that power was to know everything I could know about it. And that enabled me to not only sort of fool my handlers in my later stages of this, but to deprogram and reprogram my own mind back to a state of, healthy, balanced, emotional, kind of strong person, and teach the empowerment of the soul and the, miraculous, powerful things that we are as people, as human and human people, that we can supersede over the satanic ritual abuse that is happening on a grand scale every day. Rituals are taking place every day against humanity and humanity every day. And I just teach and counsel the way out of it. We can do this. I'm living proof. Um, so that's kind of like my message here, that, I work with targeted individuals and experiencers who, have abductees or hybridization program or secret space program, experiences of the love bite, satanic ritually abused victims, program project survivors, and newly awakened people. Because honestly, Rex, this is life shattering stuff when you uncover a lie and finally find the truth. So, that's why I'm talking to you today. I think this is really important, that people should know we can beat the artificial telepathy and the implants and the demonology and the symbology and the Satanism and this grand scale mass rituals taking place against us people, you know.
Well, certainly, if you look at the stuff that they put in vaccines, and I've talked about this enough I'm not going to discuss it very long during this podcast, but when you find out that they literally put aborted baby cells in many of the vaccines combined with a plethora of poisons that are literally toxic, and they inject them into, now they recommend it. If you're a pregnant mom, hey, get a flu shot while you're pregnant. It's good for you. You'll be wonderful. Just do it. That, in my opinion, is more than just greed. There's more to it than just corporate profiteering off of making somebody sick and, somebody that has to take or is under the impression they have to take different pharmaceutical drugs their entire life to offset a certain issue or problem that they have because of a vaccine or a drug that they took in the first place that they never should have taken. It's just mind-boggling. So there's certainly this agenda that I see behind the scenes, and I've brought this up many times before. So let's get into, if we can, and I appreciate you sharing this information with us. This has got to be very difficult for you, so we do really appreciate this. Now, if you can tell us about, you say satanic rituals. And there's a lot of speculation on what satanic rituals are. I had a guest on the other day that did a black mass blood sacrifice of a goat, he says, with a 10-foot statue of Lucifer. And I don't know. I don't know if the guy is legit, if he made it up, if he was just trying to be an entertainer. I don't know. He seemed like he was involved in it, but I'm just doing the reporting here. So first of all, are there things that you could do for our audience that would convince them? Is there something you could say or show or some type of evidence to back up some of these claims? And could you tell us about some of these satanic rituals?
Okay. So I'm going to go a step further. You talked about like the vaccines having aborted fetuses in it. Let's go even a step further. There's all kinds of things like gerbil organs in there and animal organs and things. And we have this society of autism now, and like 1 out of 3 children are born with autism. There's obviously something beyond money here. So I'm going to step back into my childhood when I was being brought through these programs. There was always an element of Satanism, whether it was rituals or spell casting. Always happens in circles. I used to call it, well, I still call it the circle of bald men. There was always a circle of bald men around me, abusing me physically and sexually, and then doing these spell castings as well. Not only that, but sitting in a chair, like being strapped down in these chairs, especially okay. When you're strapped down in a chair to do time travel type of stuff, to open up portals or expansion gates, there has to be an element of Satanism involved, because you're casting portals to let demons in and out, to let different types of beings in and out of these portals or expansion gates or bridges. And when you talk about the agenda, the Satanism has to be in place, Rex, for this less than 1% to rule the world. The populace is being ruled by these sick elites. In order for them to maintain their power, they have to use pedophilia, blood sacrifice, and ritual to maintain it, to keep the populace controlled, whether we're talking about news syndicates run by them, medicine, drug corporations, GMO foods, the water. It all has to be run on sort of spell casting. There's so many levels to it because it is. Have you ever heard of the Satanic Ritual Abuse calendar? For one, that's something you probably should look into. It's a very real thing.
Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah. Okay. If you go anywhere on the internet and just type in SRA calendar, I'm shaking right now. Sorry about that. All right.
No problem. Take your time.
Yeah, it's a really upsetting thing because I participated and I was one of the children that they needed for the pedophilia. And I'm not the only one. I'm a survivor of this. There are many children that are not alive wrecks that I want to speak for. The kids that didn't make it out. Um, you have to use a child's innocence to get the most energy. Energy of a child can open up those portals, can do these extraordinary supernatural things. They can maintain a life of an ancient being inserted into a different body, whether that body wears out. And the Queen of England is like a perfect example. People talk about her, you know, being much, much older than she truly is in her human years. So a child's energy is a necessary element, as is blood. And we can predate this all the way to the, Mesopotamian times. We can predate it to Egypt, to the Mayans. I mean, this is nothing new. The blood sacrifice and the pedophilia and the magic to open up these gates. Even Egypt with the pyramids, to use the caps energy to, whatever they were doing back then to manipulate that society. So this is not a new thing. This is thousands and thousands of years old and in place for thousands and thousands of years. They're brilliant. These are brilliant, brilliant minds that know things that are purposefully kept from us people. We're not allowed the last 2 chapters in the Emerald Tablets. We're not allowed the books that still exist from Alexandria that we're told were burned down. We're not allowed this information, but they've got it. So it maintains their power not only as ancient beings, but the ruling demons on this planet. They are not in under veils or anything. They are right here alongside of us, in us, next to us, attached to us, in your brother, sister, mother, father, child, myself, you. We have demons attached to us for a reason, and it comes out in behavior. Our souls are not like that. Our brains are, and our hearts get consumed because and it comes out in bad emotion, comes out in negatory emotion, comes out in the serial killer, comes out in a fight with a troll. There is something on the internet you can download. Many different websites have it. It's called the Satanic Ritual Abuse Calendar. Now, that is a set of dates. They are predominantly every holiday that we celebrate, which are all pagan holidays. There have been holidays inserted like Valentine's Day, Inauguration Day, Groundhog's Day. The Olympic Day was added, Inauguration Day. So they have to have a certain number of holidays to work with a 6-week cycle and a 7-week cycle to equate to the number 13. So it's a 6, 7, and 13. And the 6 is like the sign of man, 7 is the sign of God or goddess or a mockery of God. And the 13 is like rebellion and chaos and so on. There are 3 stages to ritual, whether it's on a grand scale, running this 6, 7-week cycle, or minute scales in between these 6-week and 7-week cycles. So there could be thousands of tiny spells in between the main spell. It's a setup stage, there's an objective stage, and there's a sustenance stage. And it's a mockery of the golden ratio, virtually the 369 ratio. They're inverting everything. They invert religion. They invert language, our English language. Half the words we're speaking do not even mean what we're saying. They're meaning the opposing thing. The genealogy of man, how man was created. We're missing that. We're lied to about that. We're lied to about the maps. We're lied to about everything.
I got to jump in real quick on the creation of man, because and you brought up the Library of Alexandria being burnt, and then most people think all that information was lost, but most likely there were some very powerful people that took that information and used that as a cover story and then keep that information for themselves. That's a very good point. The archons are talked about in the Nag Hammadi treaties, which are some books that were found in the 40s in Nag Hammadi, Egypt, and they have completely different versions of what most people read about in the Holy Bible, especially when it comes to Genesis, Adam, Eve, the serpent. Yahweh isn't talked about in there as much as Yaldabaoth. And if you look at the storyline of the archons and the chief archon Yaldabaoth, and then if you look at the storyline of Yahweh in the Old Testament, they're both jealous gods, and their parallels are so similar. I wonder if they're one and the same. But have you read through the Nag Hammadi treaties, like the Secret Book of John, and do you know much about the archons? Is there some connections there and some truth in that?
Yes, I fully say yes. I was a reverend at one time in my life, believe it or not. I was a reverend. I'm still known as Reverend Jolene Seebacher. I left the church because of my studies into the ancients and the Nag Hammadi and all of as many ancient scribes as I could get my hands on. My understanding, and I think a man named uh, John Lash, I think his name is John Lash. Yes.
Yeah, we've interviewed him before.
Okay. I agree with his breakdown of the Nag Hammadi. I truly do. I feel that Sophia, when she manifested herself, when she was, cast out and made into the planet, that, her boring through to create the planet or whatever, she had inadvertently created the archons. And there's, probably millions of those creatures that were created. And, Mr. Lash, I think, can even prove this. Some scientists have created mice, baby mice, and insects out of cosmic dust, so to speak. So yes, the archons are a creature that can live inside the human mind. And they do. They will come out in behavior as well. They will come out in negatory behavior. We can supersede over that. We're a very powerful race. They're very jealous of us. We own something called origin, which is, I don't like to use the term God, but in order for me to teach my clients and students, I use the term God, source, soul, self, because the origin lives in our body, in our sacral chakra area, connected to our heart and our seat of the soul and our pineal gland. It's like the infinite highway is already inside of the person. I don't really know what the question was. I'm so sorry, but
Oh, no, no, no worries. I was. Let's jump back to, if we can, some of these deities. And you said you saw Anubis and other entities that people have read about in scriptures of
yeah.
antiquity. Could you talk to us about them? What do demons look like? Are there demons that have the actual horns, the red, like you would see in a Hollywood movie? What did you see, and do you still see them?
They're beyond the constructs of what Hollywood can even represent. They are the most hideous, terrifying things that make you have heart attacks. I mean, they are uh, indescribable terror. But what I can tell you is what they truly are is a form of energy. They're just nothing more than a frequency. They really are liars. They are true liars, and they will manifest themselves into the most terrifying thing a human being could possibly imagine. They will take every single fear inside of you and create what they want you to see. Um, the initial process of me being introduced to these beings was, I didn't realize I was in programming at the time. I might have been like a 5 or 6 year old child in the bedroom with my baby sister. And I think I was a little bit older than that, actually. I think I might have been in first or second grade. I can't recall. I'd have to look back in my journals. But we had visited what we called the old country. It was in upstate New York, and visited family. I have family all the way from Tyrol, Austria, which is the center of mind control worldwide. And we had this big event there. All of the people from all over Austria and Germany and Slovakia and Bulgaria were all there at my nanny's house. And when I got home, when we got back home, my baby sister and I we always shared a bedroom, and I turned the nightlight on in between our twin beds, and these Egyptian cat statue type things. I mean, they were as tall as the ceiling, Rex. I honestly can't kid you not. They were so big. They were dancing across the wall between she and my bed. And she just began screaming. And this Anubis creature and Bastet were sort of communicating with each other, almost like they were arguing, but Anubis sort of silenced her and just began silencing my sister, screaming. And honestly, I was so terrified, I began screaming. And, it seems like such a very difficult thing to describe, because I can't tell you how much time was involved with that first meeting of these creatures. It was something I can't describe in a time frame, but it felt like hours that it took my mother to come into the room with either my baby sister screaming or then myself screaming. And once she came into the room, they literally weren't there any longer. She opened the door and they're gone. And here I am screaming, and my baby sister's, curled up in a ball pointing at me because the Anubis creature is like right at my bed. So honestly, my mother walks in the room, opens the door, and my sister's pointing at me, and I got in trouble. I got in serious trouble for screaming and whatever she thought I was doing to my baby sister. So that was my first experiences with the Egyptian side of those giants. In the Plum Island side of things is where I really saw the demons and the terrestrial beings, these very tall, translucent, like white creatures that they would never allow you to see their face, but you could see their tall, white, sort of translucent bodies. With the spell casting that was taking place, I was generally strapped down in this chair. And all of this technology would be hooked up to me, and there would be this circle of bald men, after the abuse and everything, strapped down in the chair, and they'd begin their chanting and rituals and whatever they were sacrificing at the time, whether it was a baby or an animal or buckets of blood, or there were all kinds of things there. I can tell you right away, they use time stamps, like, when you look at a clock and you see like, oh, it's 3:33 or 11:11 or 12:22. They use things like that. They attach these things to your body so they can measure the frequencies coming out of your energy center. So they'll use those coordinating numbers. They'll use directions like north, south, east, west, items, whether it's candles or metals or fires or waters. There's just so many things to setting up the ritual itself, but it would always begin with chanting and them in a circle, and there would be sigils drawn or sigils placed, and it would be like this extraordinary science fiction type thing. It would almost look like, if you look at a near-death experience video and they show the tunnel, of a person's, like what they experienced. I've had one myself, but honestly, it would look something like that. It would look like a tunnel opening up, but the tunnel would be revolving, would be circular. It almost like windy, sort of very, very windy, but very, very still in the center of the tunnel. And that's where these demon type beings, these gigantic, creatures, or these Egyptian beings would walk through. And then there would either be bodies set up. And I can only equate this to one movie. There's a movie out. It's the new Avengers movie, I believe, the Avengers movie. And it starts out with Set is having his soul transferred into this body. It's just like that, very much like that, to either bring life into an elite person or a military person or whomever was the candidate for that experiment. I have to tell you, hundreds of, probably thousands of people died. I'm lucky to be talking to you right now. I should be dead. Should be dead. It's terrifying.
And
You asked if demons were scary with horns. Yes, they are. They're the worst thing you can ever see. But once you realize they're nothing but energy, then they're taken down to a nothingness. They're taken down. There's a no fear barrier anymore, and they can't look ugly anymore. They're just energy. They're just a blast of energy or a line of energy.
when they had you strapped to this chair, was this the Montauk chair, the infamous chair that's talked about?
When I heard that term, the Montauk chair, yes, that is definitively the chair that I was strapped down in. I do not know any other female that survived the program. I've been looking for a long time. I've yet to meet any woman through the program.
And you saw people literally get sacrificed?
People, babies, lots of
Oh my
children.
goodness.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. Lots of babies. In fact, there are women that are literally farmed for their children. They are impregnated on purpose just to harvest the baby, just to kill the baby. So yes, this is very real. This is the agenda. Black magic is running the world, running it.
Was this on Plum Island?
On Plum Island, in Sandoz, in my neighbors, in my school teachers, in the doctors, in the judges, in the psychiatrists, in the business owners. Yes. And no matter whom I went to tell, whether it was my guidance counselor, he'd end up being in one of the rituals or one of the, like abuse rooms. They'd have these rooms just for your torture, just specifically like personalized for your torture. So yeah, it was hard to tell people. I tried. I've been trying to tell adults for, 51 years now, and to be, shut up as a child, or to go tell the adult, and that adult ends up being one of your perpetrators, and then your father and mother move you, and those same people are still in that new town, and there's new ones, new people in that group. So yeah, I didn't even know Dr. Lewis was a guy who even had a last name until recently. I was shattered when I found out who that man was. So yeah, I only know his last name more than only a few months now.
Did they try and get you to basically compartmentalize different personalities, or have you ever been diagnosed with multi-personality syndrome or anything like that?
I struggled with the thought of DID for a long time, and I did see certain personalities in me. I think they overbuilt me, Rex. I mean, truly, I've been able to really kind of integrate the three that I had at the time. I mean, I was never gregarious into my probably mid 30s. I was afraid to talk. Um, so, and then I had a very masculine side. I mean, I'm an exceedingly strong woman, world-class martial artist. I was being groomed for the 1980 gymnastics team for the Olympics. I, would have been there with Mary Lou Retton, and I broke programming at that time, and, purposefully broke my fingers in placement for the team just so I could break programming. And then my brother died shortly after that. And at the time, I didn't think it was anything associated, and later found out, my brother was murdered because I broke my fingers on purpose. This is an ugly, ugly world we're living in. And I can't tell you the countless people that I help that have parents participating in it. Some know and some do not know. The ones that do know are paid with either, whatever their liking is, whether it's clothing or travel or a better job or money or promotion, getting into like a club, whether it's a sort of Rosa Christian type based club or a, Daughters of Job club. It depends. This is something that people like myself have been trying to tell adults since we've been children, and we've been shut up and we've been told we're making it up. And when we go to tell an adult, that adult is either a participant or, you get suspended from school. And then if you go to speak up, you're tortured even worse when when you're hauled off to the classroom at Sandoz. You're tortured. You're thrown in a closet, and the closet might be freezing cold or blazing hot, or they'll waterboard you or strangle you or just horrendously sexually abuse you in the most heinous ways that I don't like to talk about that side of it. I'm not here to talk about that side. I'm here to talk about the side that you can get out of it, and that we are powerful, and that you can reprogram and deprogram. And not only that, but supersede over them taking your destiny ever again. The last time I let them take my destiny is when they stole my books. And I've been, 2 years strong with them not able to move me.
Well, let's talk about that for a second if we can, because you said you had several books written, and then how long did you have those just sitting there, kind of under the under the desk essentially, and then they got stolen? What happened? Talk to us about that.
I began writing. My first book I wrote was on soul healing. It was back in the MySpace days. I was a very famous psychic back then. I was known as a soul psychic soul reader. And I wrote a book on soul healing, and I wrote it through blogs on my MySpace page. And two women actually are making money off of my book. My name was never put on the book. It was never published. It was never put on paper. It was just written in a blog sort of thing on MySpace. And two women are literally using my modality and my terminology. Had I decided to write a book on it, I would have to ask permission from those women to use my own terms. So that was my first experience with a big part of my destiny being robbed. I'm certain at this point it was manufactured to be that way, with the way I know many people won't understand this term, but many will. The sort of puppet theater that's placed around your life to prevent you from having your destiny. So at that time, I did a small stint on MTV for Psychic Wars, and that got cut off on the editing floor. From there, I just began, it was probably at age 37, I began writing about my life as a MK Ultra victim and a monarch sex slave, and involved in the Plum Island girls. I didn't even know about the Montauk boys at the time. I just knew Plum Island girls. So I began writing this book. I began naming names, telling my life story, telling about my family, about some of my family in the Pittsburgh area that my um, immediate family are like prevented to talk to. So I started writing about them. I started writing about this Dr. Lewis. Um, and the book wasn't completely completed, but I was also writing a book on supernatural abilities because I'd been trained and groomed as such. And I know I'm like literally one of the only psychics in the world that hear 4 voices in a person: their thoughts, their feelings, their words, and their soul. So I wrote this book on supernatural abilities, how to develop them, how to enhance them, and then how to implement them so you can use them to your advantage through life. And I was sleeping one night. I was doing a lot of research into the Knights Templars. Actually, it was really bizarre because I was looking into the Templar side of my bloodline. And I woke in the middle of the night, and there's crashing across the hallway. I keep all my doors closed in this big house that I have, and crash in my room diagonally to my bedroom. And I woke up and I got my gun loaded, and I proceeded to go scope out my house. I'm trained in Shina and Northern Shaolin, and I'm like a walking deadly weapon holding a deadly weapon. And I opened the door to the room, and the room was kind of tousled over. The closet was open. My camera bags were all, weeded through, and every bit of writing material. I never wrote again online because of the MySpace theft of my soul healing book. So I had, kind of like these black and white composition notebooks that I had, stacks and stacks of them, and the flash drives of the things that I did have with references and websites and links like that. So I'd have my good reference material. And every single flash drive and every single notebook was taken. No TVs, no jewelry, no expensive items. Not that I have a lot of expensive items, but like literally a home theft, you would think TVs, stereos, Xboxes, antiquities, the cameras itself. I was a professional photographer at one time. They left my $5,000 Nikon, but took my flash drives. So I phoned the police. The police came. There was an open window, by the way. My window was open. There was a stool out front the window outside. So when the police came, he walked through the house and he walked into the room, and it was tousled over, and he couldn't believe that my books and flash drive were stolen, and he began sort of instigating me and calling me my ex-husband's name. He kept calling me Mrs. Courtright. Mrs. Courtright, are you feeling okay, Mrs. Courtright? Can I call anybody for you, Mrs. Courtright? And I kept demanding. He called me, Ms. Seebacher. He kept proclaiming this Mrs. Courtright. His name was Officer Katz, Katz, but he prevented me from calling him Officer Katz because it was Officer Cates. Kind of walked around the house, looked around the house. He told me to stay, and then I walked through. After he walked through, he began asking me questions about what was stolen. And when I told him these books, he asked me what the books were about. And I made the mistake of saying they're about MK Ultra and mind control programming. And I didn't even want to tell him about the other book being on supernatural development. So I, kind of left that part out. And he began saying MK, okay, MK, and kind of provoking me. Started writing in this little pad of his, and I kept asking him to please give me a police report. He denied me the police report. He insisted my ex-husband broke in, even though I'd been in no contact with my ex, and I don't even know if my ex even knew I was writing books at the time. He just wouldn't take me seriously. Now, when he left, he told me obviously to call if I needed anything, and then I could obtain the police report the following day. The man checked the house, and when I finally went to sleep that morning, I don't even know what time it was. It might have been close to 5 o'clock. I woke several hours later, and I walked through the house, and downstairs in my laundry room, there was a knife left in my door, Rex, inside my house, inside the laundry room door. And I kind of took that as a threat not to air my dirty laundry. And then I began posting on Facebook that I had the home robbery. And it's all in writing on Facebook on October 13th, 2015. And the cherry on the cake of the story is that the 13th is when, all the Knights Templars were prosecuted and murdered. And I was kind of apropos that I had been studying on the Knights Templar, and that was the day they silenced the Knight Templars. And here I was sort of silenced in a way with my books being taken. So that's the story.
I've heard similar stories. And one thing that I was wondering too is I read in some of the notes that you sent me, you actually were a part of some military programs where you did remote viewing.
Yes.
Can you talk to us about that?
Yeah, I had a handler over in Brussels at the embassy, and he would kind of make phone calls really early in the morning or really late at night, kind of like that mid-morning between 2 and 4 a.m., so to speak, kind of telephone calls, and they would be very bizarre. He would utter these bizarre statements. They were, what I've later learned, were activations. Your handler would speak a certain sentence and it would activate you. So my training in that aspect and in that part of the mind control was done, and then it was also done in I'm trying to think how I could explain this. Done in ways that I would be sitting down and coordinates would be given to me in these obscure ways. They would come in through like a telephone call, and numbers would be given to me, and I'd write them down. I'm not knowing what's truly. I am, and I'm not knowing what's truly going on. The inner part of you that's like your soul-based person, if you're working on your soul throughout your whole life and trying to figure out what's wrong with you and correcting all the negative things in you. So that part sort of knew at a latter date. But at the time when you're being given these coordinates, you're going into an altar. So you're in an altered state. And they turn out to be longitude and latitude coordinates, or you'd be hooked onto these machines and you'd be like the eyes, ears, and mind of the soldier, the super soldier. The term super soldier in itself is a fallacy. The real super soldiers are the Navy SEALs on the mission, the physical mission. We might be like the etheric soldier. It's a terrible name, the super soldiery. Douglas has it right, Douglas Dietrich with the super victim. We're given coordinates, and I only know one other remote viewer like myself. Her name is Alara Blackwell. She can verify this as well, and I'm certain she was in programming with me with the Gulf War as well. But we would be their eyes and mind. So that soldier would think they're thinking their thoughts, but there are thoughts saying, hey, go 50 yards north, 10 yards west. And they'd find their target, or they'd grab that paper, or they shoot that sheik, or they'd rescue those, refugees. It was the most bizarre part of this whole experience to try to even explain this to people, because it's so different than these ethereal or etheric super soldiers. I don't recall anything like that. I don't know any program like that. Not that I'm saying there isn't. I'm certain there are, but I wasn't used like that. My age group wasn't. The Duncan O'Finians, me, what's his name? Steve. Oh, I can't remember the guy's name. We're a different age group of super soldiery.
You're not talking about Stuart Swerdlow, are you?
No, well, I will not speak about that man, period. Just take the name Expansions, and I talked about Time Expansions, and he is a survivor of the Montauk boys. I will not speak about him. I value my life, and I will not speak about him, period. Steve, what the heck is his name? He has his own radio show. He runs Truth Cat Radio. Can't remember the guy's name. He's a super soldier. He speaks about the white hats and things like that. I wish I could remember his name. I'm terrible with names. The Monarch program makes me not want to say names because I can name my abusers then.
Kind of like some triggers, some NLP programming they put in there. Now, if I could jump in for a second too, I don't want to say any trigger words because I've actually done some research on the Montauk project, and in certain programs they had different trigger words. I think some of their earlier programs, it's real easy to look up what those trigger words are. But do you know of specific trigger words that they would use on you or other people? Or are there things that you can share with our audience without triggering yourself, to where maybe if they've been a part of some type of mind control program, they'll be like, oh man, every time that person comes around, they say those 3 words, and then I lose time, and then I wake up and I'm anyway, you know what I mean? Sorry, I was kind of joking, a bad joke, bad timing for that joke, but are there ever times like that you could describe for us?
Yeah, I'm actually safe with the trigger words. I mean, not that they don't shake me. It's just it's very hard to talk about torture and sexual violence and all that. His name is Stephen Kelly, by the way. Stephen Kelly and Duncan O'Finian and myself and Laura Blackwell. We're the older kind of real super soldiers on the real aspect, not the etheric aspect. Yeah, and yes, to the triggers. Triggers can be numerous things. They can be activation statements that sound utterly bizarre. Could be like Cupcake West turns south on Norway. It could be something very peculiar. You could be given numbers through a telephone call. You can pick up a telephone call and not hear anything, and they could subliminally be playing some kind of beat, brainwave beat music in your ear and have the subliminal coded message. You can receive postcards in the mail, or strange postcards. You can see images, certain images like butterflies, elephants, alien heads. The list goes on. It will sound that you can have a repetitive statement out of that particular person. It could sound something very normal, or it would be something that the guy or woman always says to you, and you're looking at them like, why are you even saying something like that? It's not even fitting into our conversation. So those are types of triggers you want to look for. Blinking things, blinking lights, flashing lights. Like if somebody sends one of those GIF things, or I don't know what they're called, the Giphy things, or if somebody will send it through a PM and it'll have a blinking light, happy 2017, and that's a form of hypnosis, Rex. It's the most easiest way to hypnotize and activate a soldier or a remote viewer or a psychic analyst or a spy. So triggers are very personalized, and like if somebody does a counseling session with me, I ask up to 70 different questions. It used to be about 50 questions. It's turned into almost 70 now. And I kind of get to the root of those things. So it becomes personalized, and I can also collect data that way. Butterflies, angels, alien faces, elephants, certain types of piano music. It might be played over a telephone, or one of your parents puts it on inadvertently in the middle of you doing something mundane, and you're thinking, okay, that's odd. Those are all ways to activate, not only trigger but activate the person.
Is that what they did with you?
Phone calls with me and postcards with me. The images are kind of something that follows a monarch or a MK person, and they're very personalized. Mine were always butterflies or angels.
The butterflies one I know is very popular. That's kind of the iconic image that
Yeah.
many people think of when they think of the Montauk Project or MK Ultra, because you're going from the caterpillar to the butterfly to the
Oh,
monarch.
no, I can take that further for you. Actually, behind the pineal gland is the sphenoid bone, and it happens to look identical to a butterfly or a moth or a bat, depending on how they're using you. And that is how the Monarch program got its name, by that sphenoid bone right behind the pineal gland, so they can mind control the sex slave to do the
Wow.
mission.
Yeah,
Yeah.
this is interesting because that's another piece of information that I hadn't heard before. You're giving me some more knowledge here, and that's much appreciated. Do you know your blood type?
I will not say it publicly. Yes, I do.
Can you say if you have Rh negative blood?
Can you ask another question?
I can, absolutely. The only reason I'm asking that is I know people personally that have that specific blood type that have been a part of some very fascinating things indeed. So that's fine. We can talk about other things. Now, can you share with us maybe some not necessarily telekinesis, but psychic or third eye type abilities that you personally have had in the past or still have, and could you describe it in a way that could help offset some of the naysayers?
Okay, so a lot of times I can tell what a person is thinking, and I'll say it before they speak it. If somebody is not telling me the truth, I will confront them. Sometimes when a person is talking out of their mouth and thinking at the same time, I will speak what they're thinking, kind of like completing their sentences. I can sort of see future events, like I saw 9/11, I saw the Paris shootings, but I can't give a timeline to things. I can't tell when it's going to happen. The Paris shooting, I saw Max Spear's death. I saw 2 weeks before Max passed. The
What
Paris
happened
shooting.
to Max?
I hope to do a big expose on that with slide presentation and how spell casting works, because I have the setup stage, the objective stage, and the sustenance stage, all surrounding Max Spears, and also including photographs, timestamps, predominant things he's speaking about on interviews at these particular timestamps that correlate to the beginning setup stage, the objective stage, and the sustenance stage. I do believe that I know he was murdered. I feel very, very strongly he was given either herbals or some kind of concoction of herbal medicine to poison him and to make it, make what happened to the young man, bleed black blood out of his mouth and orifices. What happened to his soul is I feel that they were trying to either obtain it, to auction it off or sell it off, or try to transfer it. I do feel that Max was a very unique man, very similar to myself, teaching the strength of the electromagnetic fields of the heart, coinciding with the infinite highway of the soul and the pineal gland. And I don't feel that anybody would be successful, but I know there's a lot of torment going on. I hope to put a presentation together. I've asked many hosts and hostesses to interview me, and it's odd that some of the ones that are some of the biggest hosts and hostess don't want to hear the truth of, offering solutions or healing or counseling or teaching how to get out of this shit or having anything to do with Max's death, and yet they'll interview or talk about it themselves. So I will get that out, Rex, and I'll do it in a proper way that'll honor Max and hopefully open up some names and actual happenings. At least I can prove the black magic side of it. I can prove that. I can definitively prove it.
Do you keep track of any of the TV shows or films today?
I do, only on a research basis, because there's such, there's patents. There are literal government patents out that run every television set in the world, and there's mind control technology in it. The newest one is to infuse subliminal, well, there's always been an element of subliminal messaging. Obviously, we've known that with Disney movies and symbology stuck in your face. But this is a level of working with brain waves, the theta, delta, alpha, gamma, so on, to impede acceptance and control. And I have to be very, very careful watching TV. A lot of things I can't watch. And I know they're probably wonderful, wonderful programs. You talked about triggers earlier. There's a show named Stranger Things that I couldn't watch because I felt I was very similar
I
to
was going
the
to ask you about that.
Elle character. I'm almost identical to her in that kind of trauma. I do feel that we're living on the upside down. That's another, I write a lot of articles and stuff. I have an article written about that.
Like
There's
we're in
a show.
purgatory or hell, basically?
Yes, yes, most certainly. And I could talk even about CERN and the Satanic Ritual Abuse calendar of how they've blown open rips and veils to let more and more demons out.
Yeah, please.
Um, there is a show called The 4400. It was very intriguing.
Good,
And The
good
Tomorrow
series.
People. The 4400 is just about almost every one of those abilities they showed on that program I've either experienced or been able to do myself. I mean, not in the, obviously I could be brought to the level of using it tumultuously, and I'm sure I have in my programming, but some of those things on that show, those experiences, those abilities, I've always done naturally as a kid and into my adult years. I teach it. So the Tomorrow People was something that was very, very intriguing to me, because they explain the building of a super soldier with that. They explain the time travel. They don't show the trauma or the sexual abuse or the ritual abuse, but they've pinged it right on the government military side, and these militia groups that are military groups funded by our tax dollars and lottery money. And um, the these programs are really like a slap in the face to anybody that has been traumatized or used in ritual or programming, let alone being a truth speaker or whistleblower. Right down to there are characters in certain movies, literature, art, whether old art, antiquity art, or even modern art, that are depicting people in society mocking us, And I know that sounds extraordinary that, if you see a movie and you feel like you're that character in the movie, but I'm not kidding you. It can be found in early literature, from hundreds of years ago, books written about people alive today. Um, and I know that sounds extraordinary, but I can prove that too.
One thing I find fascinating about if you think about time and what it actually is, some people say time is linear. Some people say, prove to me that time is actually linear. I mean, it could be all directions. And what I see time as is just something that gives us a way to observe what's going on. Because if people believe in past lives, future lives, reincarnation, etc., maybe it's as if we're all living this simultaneously. And the more we understand that and get in tune with certain vibrational frequencies, I guess you could say, the better we can become, the better we will actually be. I mean, we'll have better opportunities. We'll be able to do more, see more, feel more, create more health, balance, etc. And maybe that's kind of the key goal and some of the fears that these darker entities, whatever they are, whoever they are, because there's got to be something behind the scenes controlling these people. It's almost as if they use these techniques to get people, into just this, how do you put it? Kind of like an avalanche, it just gets worse and bigger, and they've got to lie about that lie, and then they've got this over their shoulders, and they're just like, well, man, I'm doing so much bad stuff, it doesn't matter what I do anymore. I don't know. I mean, for me, I like to go to sleep at night and feel good when I wake up in the morning, but I can't judge somebody else based upon what they do because I don't have their conscience. Some people don't have a conscience, so how can you judge them? For people that do, like you, like me, like many others that listen to Leak Project that do have a conscience, that can even fathom doing some of these things, it's like there's got to be something else out there that has taken over. And maybe it's these demons that you talk about that you can see. Maybe they actually control these bloodlines and have for thousands of years based on a multitude of reasons that we don't even know about. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
That's a big speculation thing. I mean, I know these gods and this religious scribe are not the gods or God I want to serve. I want to serve the origin that lives in my soul and connect into whatever it is outside of me that makes it manifest. You spoke about frequencies. We can talk about frequencies or energy, and energy is light, and that's even a provable thing in our construct of knowing in the science industry, or just with somebody like Tesla, for instance. Excuse me. It is a matter of frequency. Our bodies, once they die off, we are a pure energy. We are a pure frequency. We have to. I teach all of this. I teach the empowerment of the origin soul, the original being, whatever that thing is. It is not a being, and it does not have a duality to it. It is not a god or a goddess. It is some kind of origin power source. Now, what's controlling this agenda, my theory are these gods, these vicious gods in that Bible or the Quran, or all these doctrines, and there's something or themselves, that God controlling everything to keep staying in these illicit platforms on this planet, these lies. You spoke about time. Time is a fascinating thing. I mean, I've got a client over in Iran. She's like 12 hours ahead of me. Not only 12 hours, but several minutes. I couldn't fathom. I've never seen a time zone change that had minutes difference. I've seen hours difference, but never hours and minutes. So that fascinated me.
That is
I did an
interesting.
Right. I did an interview with James Bartley, and he was several hours and minutes, a day, over a day ahead of me, plus minutes. I was dumbfounded by it. I'd never heard of anything in my 51 years that time could be even minutes difference. So it opened up to me that everybody lives in their own reality, Rex. I mean, you and I live in different realities. We get off the phone and we get off Skype and we're going to go live our own little reality, just like my neighbor and my cat. We all live these different perspectives of life. I'm more of an internal person. Whatever is controlling this planet, I want to be able to connect into the origin soul, the God source soul self is how I teach it, so people can kind of understand that a God or a goddess has a duality. Even the God, or those two gods, those vicious, controlling, fearful gods, have a duality to them. And people often say, well, I pray and pray and God never hears me. We say amen, and amen means, hey, you know what? Everything I just prayed for, amen, just nullify and void everything I just prayed for. Amen, nullify it, please. Amen, nullify it, please. So I started, in my reverend years, I wanted to know what God was, and I understood why it couldn't answer prayers. Number one, we're saying amen, and it just means throw everything away I just prayed for. And number two, that we're serving these two nasty control freaks that are hiding the greater source. And that source seems to live in every single person I talk to, whether they're nasty or beautiful. Their souls are so pure. Their souls contain this non-dualistic power. And when you ignite that in your soul self, it then connects on to whatever that exterior power is. That exterior power can't intercede by itself. If you go and pray to it and do nothing in your soul or your mind or your behavior or your heart, whatever, it can't answer for you if it's pure. It's just purity. It's just pure. It has no dualism to it. It has no man, no woman. If it's a man God, it's got duality. It's got good and bad. It's got man and female. Can't even be a God that says, oh, I'm half man and half woman. It's still dualistic. That type of God could intercede for a person. That's why people all over the world say, oh, I talk to angels. Oh, I talk to this goddess. Oh, they help me. Well, shit, yeah, they'll help you. They're dualistic. But the origin, which is called the origin in the ancient scribe, if you've read any of the real ancient stuff, it's called origin. It's
Like what, for example?
Oh, I wonder if the Nag Hammadi speaks about the origin. These are in old alchemical books, inner alchemy books, talks about the origin. The origin is what people would call creator origin. It's just pure. It has no intercession capabilities because it doesn't think in the confines of good and bad. It's just pure, pure. So when you ignite it in yourself, in your soul self that has the highway to the soul and the heart, and then the highway to the pineal gland, where you're these energy centers, your body dies off and you become a frequency. But when you're a human, if you can ignite that in yourself, it connects onto that origin that is a pine cone or a sunflower or the air or the stars or the universes or the galaxies or it's the alls of everything. That's where the intercession happens. When you ignite it in your body, and the whole Bible is about your body. The whole story about Christ dying on the cross is right in your body. It's a seed that makes oil behind your pineal gland, and that oil goes and it dies every month. It goes down your spine and it dies on this thing that looks like a cross on your sacrum bone. It dies on the cross, and then 3 days later it rebirths, it plants a seed, and then ascends back up your spine into the heavens of your mind again to make the oil. So if you perfect stuff in your body and connect to the origin source, the God source in yourself, that's where manifestation happens. That's where your prayers, I don't call it praying anymore, it's very predatorial, the praying. I do self-work, self-blessing work, self-talk, and I use certain brain type wave therapy to self-talk, and that's where I get my manifestation. That's what I teach, Rex. I teach the empowerment of who we are. I teach the Bible in your body. I teach the ancient scribe in your body. So to me, that's the answer of where I want to go. Now, who's running this agenda, I believe, are a bunch of like narcissistic, jealous gods. They're all gods and goddesses pissed off at each other and, demon ramped up. And these elites are, some really ancient people having their souls transferred in and out of different bodies, let alone the cloning and We're in the third phase of genetics. We're literally in the literal stage of the Bible. We're getting ready for the third generation of genetics here.
Now, if you believe things kind of in the biblical terms of the Bible, you read Revelation, and there's a lot of prophecies that can parallel certain times and events today, yet at the same time, the one prophecy that says there will be rumors of war and constant war, when has there not been rumors of war and constant war? At least from modern history, it's been going on for thousands of years from what I know about, but I don't know. I mean, that could be made up too. I don't remember what it was like 5,000 years ago in a different body if I was in a different body. So I can't verify that for 100%, but there's enough stuff out there that points to there's been war going on for a long period of time. So I just wonder if it's always going to be like that here in this specific reality. And you say this is, in your opinion, kind of like hell. Well, if that's the case, maybe it's supposed to be a dualistic world here. Maybe for as much good, there has to be an opposite to counteract that, to kind of like be a boot camp for people to decide. Do they want to join the dark side, or do they want to stay with the light? And they can decide for themselves, and then maybe that's where they go to the next level. I don't know.
Right. This whole prophecy thing about the end times and stuff, if I take everything internally, like biblically internally into my body, I want to be the type of person that maybe when my body dies, I can kind of transcend out of this prison planet or this hell type thing. I'm kind of just theorizing it right now. Maybe our frequencies change. So, you get to a certain level and your frequencies change, and then you don't have to be in this human hell anymore. I don't know. There has always been war. I mean, 22,000 years ago, there was a grand cosmic war that I think is taken over the planet, and we're reaching a 26,556 year cycle. Like, we're living it right now. It began the day before Christmas. Technically, for a lot of people, it began January 1st. So, every 26,556 years, there's been these massive cataclysms. So, if you want to gauge it towards the poles shifting and the magnetization, a little off key, maybe the end times will be this 26,000 year cataclysm, but maybe not. Who the hell can say? Who can say? Nobody can say. Nobody can remember 22,000 years ago except for bits and pieces. I do have past life recollection. I've had it since I've been a little girl, from the most mundane life to some really strange things, right down to a Knights Templar, and even some things don't even want to say. And, not proud of some of the past lives I've had, but, I'm not the only person talking about past life that have these recollections. But even with that, Rex, we have so much that we don't remember. We're dealing with a human being that works on, maybe 12% of their brain, the normal functioning human being on the planet, with the exception of the Teslas or the Stephen Hawkings, have the access to 14% of their brain. We have been told the consciousness is a negative thing to expand. You crazy tinfoil hat wearers, you crazy people calling yourself psychics and remembering past lives. To me, to expand the consciousness is to open it up more than that 14%. So I happen to have a very high IQ myself, but I'd like to think my brain is more expanded than even a Stephen Hawking in the type of work that I do with my soul and the, wanting more knowledge, wanting the Thothian knowledge, if you will. And it's not a bad thing to open your consciousness, to change your frequencies, because what if there is a cataclysm? I want to be in that frequency where I want to go where the hell I belong once and for all and never come back to a prison planet. Or maybe the prison planet still remains and you get to a certain level and you can get the hell out of here. That's what I'm hoping. Whether it blows up or not, whether there's a cataclysm or not, I hope by the time I die that I have enough of something to bypass all of these lies, whether there's a reincarnation trap or grid or whatever. I'm going past the halls of Amente in my own consciousness. I'm smashing the mirrors that I know, because I work internally and I teach this. And my students know it works because their lives change.
Well, and you've got a website, spirituallifejourneys.webs.com. You're also on Facebook, Facebook, JoJo Seebacher, Bacher. Now, I did want to bring up also, because we kind of went off track for a minute, if we can go back, you mentioned CERN, the ripping holes in different dimensions, paralleling with the RSA calendar.
Yes. Okay. So I did an interview on the Terry Joyce show, I believe on the 29th or so of October. And I was talking about rituals in place and how they get set up. And like your yearly ritual in the grand scale would start, right around Super Bowl Sunday. It's the ending, well, let's back up. So it begins and it sort of takes off around Easter. I can't really tell you where it definitively begins, but it's a short time after the Super Bowl. Super Bowl halftime show kind of exalts the end of the year ritual. So it begins the new setup stage. And by Easter, the setup stage is in place for the objective. So I was doing this interview with Terry Joyce, and I was talking about, CERN, has the goddess Shiva outside of it. She's the goddess of destruction. And I was explaining the lineages between Samhain and Nimrod and Ishtar and all that kind of crap. And what happened was I was talking about every Halloween, she would do a special Halloween show about Satanism and paganism. And it pissed a lot of pagans off because I know there's some really beautiful people that love paganism and, being witches or whatever. But I did all that when I was in my 20s. I don't condone it, but I'm not going to judge somebody for doing it either. Nonetheless, I was talking about the Halloween being so symbolic for that part of the setup stage had already taken place for the veils to be ripped open. The veils that contain what they say Azazel is trapped in, Azazel and his legions. They've been trying to rip that veil open for eons, Rex, for eons and eons. And HARP had a lot to do with it, and a lot of this Satanic Ritual Abuse calendar stuff. They do this on a daily basis, on a yearly basis, and they've been doing it for long, long time. And I felt at that point on that Halloween show that they were so close to ripping down one of the veils to let Azazel out. I don't believe that they were successful, but there was an element where there were some tears put in that veil with CERN's involvement, because that following day, and this is just based on my personal experience, I went to sleep after the interview explaining the whole setup, objective, sustenance stage of Samhain for Azazel's legions. And I had a dream that night, and I was in a dream, and the dream turned into another dream. But in the other dream, I could still see myself in the first dream. It was kind of inverted. When I physically woke up, the second and first dream were in reality. It was literally, I could not only see snow in my room, my house was freezing cold. I have a picture of half of my property having snow on it, and only my neighbor's roof having snow on it in their property. The whole rest of the development had no snow on it. The snow was in my dream. I'm not going to tell you what the dream was about, but the two dimensions had blended into the 3D reality dimension. The following day, I had something significant happen as well with a dream time. People were standing in like physical. I had a roommate at the time standing in my room, could hear cars driving through my room. I'm not kidding you. There were you could hear music playing through the wall. I could see this guy. He looked like David Wilcox tapping on my wall underneath my TV. I could see him from the dream I had just left in this 3D reality. So I had theorized that there were physical rips in that lower kingdom to see some of the Legion of Azazel. And I know it sounds bizarre, and somebody would call me a nutball, and I'm not a nutball, and I know this is really kind of bizarre talk, and I can assure you I'm a responsible, emotionally balanced woman with high ethics and virtue and moral, and I'm just not going to speak this kind of bizarre stuff for no reason. This is something I can not truly validate, but I can prove with the rituals that go on yearly for this very purpose at Halloween time. Something massive happened. I noticed it in the influx in people's behavior. I like to call it like an infection. It's like a demonic infection. And there's another infection with the artificial telepathy and nanotech kind of infection. And, it's hard to take somebody like me seriously. It's hard to believe when you hear something like that out of a person's mouth. It does tend to put some doubt in your listeners, I am sure. But I can tell you it's very real. Demons are very real. I've been seeing them since I've been 3 years old. I'm 51. I still see them today. I see them on people, on people's necks, on people's backs, out of their hips. It's in pictures. They're very real, Rex. This is a very real satanic system that has been in place for thousands of years.
Are you a good artist?
I'm crafty and I can paint, but I'm not so good at drawing. I've done some automatic drawing where it's been extraordinary, but if I sat down and tried, probably not so good.
The only reason I ask is lately I've been on this art kick for some reason, and I've been looking for kind of starving artists that have a real surreal type of canvas that they use. And there's a lot of people out there that describe, or not describe, but they put on paper what they see sometimes, whether it's in their mind or how they feel certain people are. And it's just incredible. And when you brought up you see these demons and stuff like that, I just thought, how fascinating would it be if you could put that on paper, whether it be a drawing or a painting or something, or if you even had somebody that could put it on paper for you, because I would be fascinated to see what these things look like. Can you describe them to us in words?
I have a client who's an artist. He's a digital artist. His work is incredible. I have an appointment with him tomorrow, actually. I'll talk to him and see if he can create some of the things that I see and show you. They're undescribable, Rex. They're terrifying. If you have fear, any personalized fear, they will manifest upon those fears. So if you have a fear of heights or a fear of fangs or a fear of snakes or worms or water or fire, if you fear easily, they can manipulate any type of face they want. The horns are very, very prominent. Wings, they'll either have 4 wings or 6 wings or 4 heads, just like the angels. They talk about the angels in the Book of Enoch. They look like that. They would look like you would think, these winged, 4-headed creatures, or 2 heads, and so on and so forth. Lots of fangs, glowing eyes, sometimes many eyes, sometimes 1 eye if they're like a giant type kind of creature. Um, they are horrible. They're horrible. But I always like to take them. Look, I'm an expert. I mean, I've been seeing them since 3. They don't rock me anymore. I just,
What
I've
was the
even
scariest? Sorry to interrupt. What was the scariest one or the most frightening encounter you've ever had with a demon or what people consider a dark entity?
the most frightening one was as a little girl, I would repetitively have this Satan type character. He would present himself in a tuxedo with a very tall top hat, and his face would just boil, like fill with boils and melt, and fill with boils and melt, and he would laugh at me and tell me horrible things about myself, and it was wretched. It was a repetitive, either physical vision, like doing a mundane thing, having a vision, or seeing the thing right in my mother's living room on the white couch, or in a dreamtime state. It plagued me for years. This was probably up until my late 20s. This creature would constantly provoke me and terrify me, turn a bright sunny day into a dark day, casting, lightning and pouring rains. And all of a sudden, like a record would come on of my brothers of AC/DC blaring the Back in Black album. I mean, this was bad. This was the thing in my life for years. And the day I'm pretty sure I was in my beginning MySpace days as a psychic, I had finally offered to love that creature and say, I love you. I'm in love with you. I love you. And it never came back again. That was the
Do
most
you
terrible.
do you think that was the devil, the Satan?
I do believe so. Yes, I do. It actually did try to get me to sign my soul. It tried me to get me to scribe what's called scrying on the ground. A lot of people do scrying with mirrors. They tried to scry me on the ground. It just made life really hard, really hell, a lot of hell. I believe it was Satan himself. It was the most, not a monster face, but such a disgusting, terrifying face to see boils, big pockets of boils on the thing's face and just keep manifesting. It was ugly. It was almost like looking at a hellfire face without the fire. It's stop your heart kind of stuff. I have seen other demons. I've seen the horn demon numerous ways. I've seen it looking like the things in movies, but on a worse scale, on a thing you can never imagine. I'd have to have this guy draw it with hair and fangs coming out of places you wouldn't even know would be a mouth.
That kind of reminds me of some of the artwork by H.R. Geiger or Giger, which was heavily influenced the films Alien, Aliens, Prometheus, and he's got like this techno transhuman slash alien slash erotic slash dark surreal sharp edges, etc., and the way he incorporates it all together. I wonder if he's actually scrying demons sometimes. I mean, there's people out there that put together this art that you just look at and you say, wow, where do they come up with that kind of stuff? And the way you are describing it makes me think of the possibilities, like you say. And there's also another film out there, if it wasn't very popular, I'd recommend people watching this just because I think it'll give you a good perception on the possibilities of there being these parasitic entities that kind of feed off of people outside of what we can see with our
Yeah.
eyes. Typically, it's called Branded, and it came out a few years ago. That's a film I definitely recommend watching just to get kind of an idea. And I wonder if a lot of these kids that have autism that have been literally brain damaged from the chemicals in the vaccines, I wonder if that also allows certain entities to somewhat attach to them and influence them in other ways also, which is another horrifying thing. Not only are they damaging these poor children at birth oftentimes physically and mentally, but also maybe it has an effect on their spiritual level. Hopefully in the overall scheme of things, it will make them even more powerful and agile and fluid in the next level. But just thinking of this particular reality that they're in, that's got to stop.
I do work with a couple of autistic children, and throughout my life, a lot of kids who are either terrified to talk or can't talk until they're like 5 or 6 years old. The demons will come in parasitic form as well. They almost look like sperm in a way, or black flecks or sperm type things, protozoa. The movie Prometheus is very, very obscure too, because there are demons that look like that. There are beings that look like that. They will take any form. You can't, probably, if you've seen it on TV, I guarantee that those are something that are real. I've seen so many different types, even just black mists or certain colored mist. I've seen like these things that look like spiders, but they have purple lights and they keep growing legs with more lights, and they're in a mist of like a dark gray background. Demons will come in shadow forms. They'll wear suits, the Watchers. They have wings. They come in blue spheres. They come in genie form, like the jinn. There are thousands of them, Rex, and there are all these parasites floating around people. Like you can't see them. You cannot see them. They look like an infection. They look like something you'd see under a microscope, but they're all in the air around you. And people would think I'm nuts for that, but I've expanded my consciousness since I've been a little girl. I'm not a normal person. I'm definitely not, but I'm a normal in the way of being kind and beautiful and forgiving and nurturing and accepting and understanding. But I'm also one kick-ass lady, and I don't stand for injustice. I really fight against injustice. But to have all of this, to see all of this, it took me into my late 20s to drive a car because I couldn't see through the grids of energy, let alone the dead people crossing the street. In the middle of the street, you'd slam on the brakes and get yelled at by your dad for slamming on the brakes so you don't hit the person that looks like a person, but it's not. There's no person in front where my dad is, but there's certainly a person where I'm standing. So I'm a very unique woman here. Um, it's very scary. I do a lot of picture readings and can see demons on people, like husbands or wives, or I can hear them talking to people over a phone. I can tell them where their body hurts sometimes because there'll be a demon attached there. It's not been a fun life of mine, but at least now I'm, in the last 14 years, I've been doing something good with it, helping to deprogram, reprogram, and get people's behavior and mind strength, their mentalism in a place of power so they can exert their supernatural abilities. We're put here for a reason. The archons are jealous of us for a reason. And our brains are artificially knocked off that 80%, 85% for a reason. I want to teach people how to unlock more than 14% of their brains and know their power and know how to supersede over these lies.
What's next for you? And if somebody's interested in maybe, well, let's get there in just one second. Let me ask you one more important question. Do you think that extraterrestrials exist, and are you under the impression that they're all bad? Are there good ones and bad ones just like everything else? And I want to get more into those translucent type beings that you saw back in the day.
All right, my website has a lot of new age crap on it from when I need somebody to fix my website actually, but my next venture is to fix my website and get more people in to learn what I know. The whole thing about angels and extraterrestrials, and I'm going to go with the point where we talked about this origin source. Are there good and bad factions? I'm certain there are. I'm certain there are factions, trying to help and trying to destroy, but no good angel or alien will ever show themselves. I don't care. The good does not need to show themselves. They will intercede when they're supposed to. That is my concern. I've worked in the New Age movement. I have bucked everything. I tried it out and it didn't work, and I wrote why it didn't work, and I've studied why it didn't work. The whole thing about good alien, bad alien, I believe these beautiful looking creatures, these Pleiadians and all of those, are here terraforming our planet, and they're liars. They are complete liars. I've had interface with them. I've never met a terrestrial that had any good intention, let alone an angelic that's had any good intention. And if I'm basing everything on origin, I know good can't intercede without you having yourself as the center. And I'm only going to trust origin source. I'm not going to trust anything unless it's face to face with me, that I could touch it, talk to it for an extensive amount of time where other people can hear it too. Why would you do that to yourself? Why would you take any chance? Because even if they do something good for you, Rex, you'll have to pay it back. You'll have to pay it back in a car accident or job loss or a divorce or a kid that dies or you die or a sibling dies. You will pay it back in trauma, in loss, in heart loss, mental anguish. It is something I've been speaking about. It's what made me famous on MySpace. I
Were you
began
on
my web.
MTV also?
I was on MTV, but I was cut on. I was left on the editing floor. I met the Psychic Twins. I met Teresa Caputo in her early days. There was tons and tons of people on that show. There were numerous names. There was one Psychic Wars. It was all about psychics. There were numerous series.
Now, is it easier to get a hold of you on Facebook then?
On Facebook right now. My website needs, I built it in 2008 and I've never needed it, but now I'm looking to rebuild it. They can get a hold of me on Facebook through private message and ask for phone time or session work. I don't need to hear life stories because I'd rather have I offer 4 hours for $65 and the counseling becomes free for a lifetime 24/7. And I do facilitate a private teaching group that I have to screen you before you're allowed in. I have really strong ethics and high virtue and morals, and people have to really be kind to be in that group. So Facebook Messenger, ask for a phone time session, and it's $65 for 4 hours with free counseling thereafter.
Well, Jolene, thank you so much for coming on the show with us here at the Leak Project, sharing your testimony with us. I know that must have been extremely difficult. I could tell even when you were talking about it that it was emotional for you. So I appreciate it, and I'm sure that our audience appreciates it as well.
You, Rex. Thank you so much for having me. I'm so honored to be on your show. It's such a high platform of ethics in itself, and I truly appreciate you. Shout out to everybody at Decoders of Truth. I love all you guys. You guys rock it, and I hope to carry on some, good collaboration this year, Rex.
Right on. Absolutely. You have a wonderful day. A happy new year. Ladies and gentlemen, check out leakproject.com. Also, youtube.com/clandestine time lord. Be the change you want to see and question everything, ladies and gentlemen. If you would please, for the people that have a chance to listen to this podcast here at the Leak Project and through Facebook and different forums as well, tell us about yourself. I mean, what brought you to where you are? I read through some of the trials and tribulations that you've gone through, and wow, I mean, it's like something you could make an entire series out of just the stuff that you've seen. So
yeah, I sure could make a series about it. I've written several books actually about it. The books were stolen on October 13th of 2015, trying to tell my story. I've literally been trying to tell my story since I've been a little child. I was brought up enhanced with medicine and injections and all kinds of torture and trauma and put into these programs as a child. Been surrounded with ritual abuse and testing and torture and more testing to be inserted into these black operative programs. Anything ranging from psychic analyzing to remote viewing to spy work and time travel. The most notorious program I'd been involved with was with the Montauk side of things, but on something called the Plum Island Girls. I don't know any other survivors other than myself with the Plum Island aspect to Montauk. But my kind of thing.
Let me jump in real quick if I can, just because it's kind of pertinent to what you just brought up. I have a good friend, actually, one of the few people I still know from back when I was just a kid. He actually used to live just down the street from me, and he was involved with the Montauk program. And I don't know exactly what part, but he's got like scars on his body and stuff, and he's still under this weird. He has just a very interesting life. Let me just put it to you that way. Like where he lives, I think, is still under some type of, how do I put this? I think he still has handlers, and he's 39. It's very interesting. So please get into that. That's incredible.
Right. My career actually started with my father's corporation he was working for called Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. And at the time, as a little child, a lot of the project paperclip scientists were over there. I know they not so recently closed Sandoz, but many of those scientists ended up going over into Brookhaven Labs, which is a big conspiracy in itself. So I was kind of worked on with a very famous mind control expert named Dr. Lewis. I always knew him as Dr. Lewis, and it turned out to be Dr. Lewis Joylin, one of the cohorts of General Aquino, one of his famous cohorts. And, these people brutalized us children. They put us through torture and trauma, lots of sexual abuse, satanic type torture, disgraceful type of things, and then tested us. And it's a little hard to talk about. I recently did a series with the History Channel that'll be airing in April about the Plum Island aspect of it. It makes me really upset. Um, yeah, there's a lot of torture, Rex, and uh, I my career took me all the way to the Gulf War with the military and government. I was a remote viewer into the Gulf War. The things that I saw throughout my life were terrifying. You know, you'd be physically witnessing demons in front of you or terrestrial beings. And I know it sounds very sci-fi, but the extraordinary technology that was also present during my torture and testing are equipment that I've never seen to this day in any public forum or technology I've ever seen, even scanning the internet. So this is technology that's not known to mankind, but a certain group certainly know this technology, and it's either very futuristic or very ancient, such high levels of technology that was attached to us physically, you know, this machinery to kind of force you into certain mind control programs. And I think because of the way they made me from I was enhanced in my mother's womb with lots of medication she took, and then coming out of the womb, you
What
know,
kind of
just
medication?
it was injections. So what wherever in those vials of injections, it was more than vaccines. I was physically injected almost on a daily basis for years, given what was told to me at the time, allergy shots and things like that. And the type of shots were things that would make you go into these conscious levels of or subconscious levels of awareness that, you know, as a child, you're not understanding such, but it caused me to hear people's minds, thoughts. I could not only hear their thoughts, but I could feel their feelings. A lot of times it didn't match what was coming out of their mouths. If they were speaking something, their minds would, you know, completely oppose what was coming out of their mouths. But I always heard this fourth little voice in the person, and it was what I used to call the God voice, because it would always try to, you know, tell me about that person's beauty and to try to tell the person to stop thinking and feeling that way, to stop being so illicit or lying or abusive or, you know, whatever. So, you know, I tried to be this little supernatural child seeing dead people and ghosts and demons. It was just a normal thing for me. I mean, I to this day still see energy. I see grids and specks, whether they're black or, you know, sparkly. So I'm this extraordinary child with seeing, you know, dead people and demons and creatures like Anubis, even Anubis and Baal and Bastet. And you know, I can name some of these beings now, but as a child, I did not know who this Anubis character was standing in my bedroom with me and my baby sister. And, you know, my parents, my mother predominantly was my handler, and she was highly abusive, emotionally abusive and verbally abusive. And I believe it took me 49 years to kind of admit that she knew what she was doing. Um, it was a type of life where I was put into so much trauma and sexual abuse and all of this training, this testing on a military level, tested and trained in psychic abilities and remote viewing and CRV and kinesis. I was trained through the military and science and government programs. So I was sort of built so enhanced that hearing the soul's voice in people made me drive to learn more about what that voice was. So I started investigating the soul at age 8 and began reading my first book, Plato's Dialogues on the Soul. And I haven't stopped since.
Where
So,
what bases did you go to, and could you describe to us the actual experiments that they would do for telekinesis and different psychic level testing, please?
whew, all right. It it's hard to talk about because there's so much trauma and torture in the process before they sit you in the chair and test you. You need to give me the question again so I know how to answer that properly.
Okay. Now, you said that you remember different military bases. So I was wondering what military bases they trained you at, and if you could tell us
Okay.
about like the actual testing that they did to see, okay, you know, we're going to open this person's third eye to where she can see this demon or something, because you said you see demons and archetypes and specific what many people would consider Egyptian gods, because that's what a lot of people, you know, that's their thought when they think of Anubis, kind of like the god of the underworld, right?
Correct. All right, so let's go all the way back to the childhood because it began at Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. I was physically tested and tortured in that location of Sandoz Pharmaceuticals.
And your
Uh,
dad was the one that was actually doing this to you?
I believe my mother was my handler. My father traveled often between his accounts he had through the industry that he was providing. He just Sandoz Pharmaceuticals was one of the industries he was providing his service to. So predominantly the torture and testing took place there for years, into my high school years. So I was 16 when I graduated early, all the way through Sandoz Pharmaceuticals. In the interim of Sandoz building me, I was taken into the East Hampton area, the Hamptons of New York. I had an auntie living up there. She still lives there. And then my programming began there at that base, not on Camp Hero. This was on Plum Island, Rex. This was the Animal Disease Control Center. There are underground bases under that facility, which is now closed, by the way. It moved into Kansas in Tornado Alley. So they were experimenting on animals and mutations and genetics and time travel, diseases, biowarfare. And my memories are between Sandoz and Montauk Point in the Hamptons. I've got some missing years of school between 6th grade and almost 10th grade. So the facility I'm certain I was at that point was Plum Island. When they sit you down and test you, it could be a number of things. So if you're being trained to be a psychic, you're tested with lots of cards, you're tested with games, you're tested with brain stimuli. They've got all these wires connected to your head to see, what facilitates the, I don't even know how to explain that. I don't know how to explain that. You'd always have a handler with you, and it would be a handler that would be with you for years, and they would change depending on the program. The remote viewing was taught in basically like classrooms, as were a lot of these programs, the kinesis programs. It takes a lot out of you physically. It truly does. I mean, some of the things with moving items would exhaust me for, I'm not kidding you, weeks, like weeks out of my body. I'd be sick. I'd be so sick for weeks after, it might take me 4 hours to finally move something. And then I'd be, headaches and sick for weeks. When I could finally start to levitate things, I'd be sick for a good month. So it's a lot of abuse on the body. It's a lot of abuse on the mind because
Bet you those drugs they were injecting you with had a part of it as well.
the drugs were definitely a part of it, as well as Sandoz would create these things for the populace, though. They created fizzies and all kinds of little candies for the kids that were out in the public. And they'd kind of, like, my father would bring these things home and say, here, try these. And they'd, he'd drop a little tablet in my glass of water and it would turn into this fizzy stuff. And my sisters and brother wouldn't take it, but I would. So I'd be like this guinea pig for some of their products. And to see them out on the market was even, more extraordinary because, honestly, I feel like some of this stuff was obviously poisoning people to give you some of the inserted. I know nanotech maybe wasn't a big thing back in the 70s, but I'm certain it was already out there. I'm certain of it.
Oh, I
The
remember.
technology to control the brain.
Absolutely. I remember reading an article back in 2011 about nanotech, and there's thousands of consumer products now that actually use nanotechnologies to basically transition certain chemicals to bypass the brain-blood barrier, go right to the brain. And
Yeah.
it's so tiny, it's pretty scary to think about the long-term consequences and how easy it would be to put certain products in people via nanotech. So that's interesting that you brought up the testing, and then you look at the aspartame phenomenon, which is in virtually all products. Now, if you go to the grocery store or a gas station, especially if you want to pick up a drink, if you want to pick up a fruit drink even, or some gum or mints or candy, almost all of it has aspartame, which is genetically modified E. coli feces, which in the 70s, there was a briefing with Congress and the Pentagon where they said, yeah, aspartame could be used as a weapon to take out entire civilizations, essentially. And now it's in everything, and it's okay. So that's fascinating. Sorry to divert attention there. Let's go back to where you were discussing. So they used you as a guinea pig, and did they use your other family members, like your sisters and brothers as well?
Absolutely not. I was the ostracized child. I was the reject. I was the freak. I was the spawn of Satan because I could see and hear and feel things and say things what was on people's mind. I knew foreign languages when I was a little child. I would speak them fluently. It was just I was a phenomenon to my parents. I was the Satan's child. That's what my name was. I was an abused child. I was neglected and abused and never hugged, never loved, never told anything good. I was pretty much hated throughout my entire first 30 years of my life. You mentioned something about the blood barrier. I mean, that is the predominant thing that they will assault you with right in the womb with ultrasound. These ultrasounds aren't even necessary on a pregnant woman. Ultrasound was developed by the Navy, for goodness sakes. I mean, the Navy would not even use this. They use this as a weapon, Rex, and yet they're ultrasounding little children to get at the blood barrier, to insert to mess the genetics up, basically. Let's
I had never
simplify.
heard that before. That's
Oh
brand
my
new to me.
goodness. Yes, this is a phenomenon. Actually, this is what should be known. In fact, most deaths with childbirth happen in a hospital. You'd be safer to have the child at home. Disregard these ultrasounds. There's a woman named Janice Bartholomew that speaks on it. She's a former nurse and became a midwife to talk about what was happening in the hospitals, and that's just Satanism in